Good afternoon, SMBC families, and this is a bit of time to spend, especially with parents of high school students. I really enjoyed having some time to just speak words of blessing and vision, I hope, for families and parents of middle school last week. And so I'm also now glad to get to do the same thinking about high school students. During the pandemic, I sent you this book. I've referenced it several times. I want to continue just to point you there. It is simply offered as a resource. And I'm just going to say this. I'm sad that I didn't put page numbers on it. I wish I would have done that. But you'll come to a 2-page spread. One says middle school, one says high school. If you count from the first front page, it is, I think, page 43, but just look for something that says high school and look for the page that talks about high school, and it lists like a dozen phrases that says growth and it just some specific things. And so what I did last week is I read through what I had written for the middle school years, and I picked out a few highlights that I wanted to just emphasize. And so I have been doing the same thing today as well. And what happened is that pretty much every single one I found that I was wanting to say something, which is kind of a little funny. So I was going to try to highlight it, but I just want to say that some of you have watched perhaps the one because you have a middle school and high school student. My desire in this is to simply be with you in the midst of this really special time of life that you are the parent of a high school student. And my heart about this, as I mentioned last week to middle school families, to parents, is my hope is that this is not some canned something. My hope is that this is a way to be with you from my heart, to think below the surface about things that I am aware has gone on for Lee and I as our sons have grown and gone, as well as I get to continue to have the amazing gift of being around some of your sons and daughters, and more specifically with some of your sons in high school. So I just want to say that I'm really thankful for that opportunity. This is actually a really fun season for me throughout the COVID year, with a lot of changes and some different things. Hold on a second, I'm going to show you. I have really enjoyed over the last month preparing my athletic calendar that's for March and April. And so what I've done is I just have tried to find every student's schedules, and I have listed out on every day everybody who's doing what. And obviously I can't be everywhere all at the same time, but I just each week am joyfully moving towards looking at the week and looking at where I would get to be. And so I'm looking forward to, for those of your sons and daughters who are on athletic teams during this spring, just getting to be around and support them. And that's really a gift from my heart to get to do that. But my desire in the next few minutes, it won't just be a few, probably about 15 or 20. I am wanting to just speak real life words to you just from me. This is not from a book. I mean, it's recorded in this little bound book, but it is just thoughts of wanting to spur you on towards Christ and towards one another as husband and wife. And I'll just start there and jump in. Jesus, I pray that you would use these words however you want to for my friends. My starting place is this: it'll be over sooner than you think. I know that some of you are just starting. I know that some of you already know this. I know that for some of you, you may say, Damon, you're full of it. It's not. It's so slow. It was excruciatingly slow. And I respect that. I just want you to know from my perspective that the high school years seem to really accelerate. And even for those of you who have students that are freshmen, the way that these years are geared, they just seem to go really fast. Each day still has 24 hours. Each month the how many ever 28 to 31 days that it has, 12 months, I understand, but for whatever reason, the way that it's geared, it just seems to go really quickly. So what I want to say into that is just simply an encouragement of this. For most of you, your children will be gone. For some of you, your children may linger and be with you. But for those of you whose children will move through high school and then they will move on in some fashion, you will be with your spouse. And so my encouragement to you today is I want to encourage you to think with a ninth grader, with a 10th grader, 11th grader, or a senior, regardless of how much time you have left with your children, for the most part being at home before that transition begins, is that you would consider how you are investing in your friendship with one another. I'm aware as I say that some of you are thinking, dude, you're way behind. There might also be some of you that are cringing because there is strain, because maybe you have an awareness that you don't really necessarily feel like there is friendship between you and your spouse, just trying to keep it real. And I would like to say to you all that there's no judgment in this, there's invitation, and that is, if you as husband and wife, in anticipation of your sons and daughters being away when that transition happens, if you have any awareness that there is stress or strain, or there is dwindling relationship and friendship for the two of you, I just want to tell you that it would be an honor for Lee and I to get to be with you, or for me to get to be with you as a husband, for you to get to be with Leah as a wife, and just to talk through that. Jesus was acquainted with sorrow, and he knew disappointment. And so, interestingly, the church ends up being a place where that's not really explored and not really dealt with. And the sadness about that is, specifically about this point, I didn't know we would jump in quite so quickly. Specifically about this point is the sadness about the church not really necessarily being a place where we would be present about this is, so what it means is these next few years will just play out, and it'll just happen, and they'll be gone, and there won't be any tending and cultivating on y'all's part. And I think for the most part, in some ways, it could just be sadness. So I want to make an offer to you, just to simply say, if Leah could be with you as you think about you as husband and wife team, it would be our honor, it would be our joy. And please let us have that opportunity. Just to have real life conversation is such a good gift. So enough of that. Cultivate in your relationship. I would be delighted and honored, and Leah and I together would be delighted to talk about that with you. 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, I believe it goes quickly. I think that your home base is important. There is so much pull of busyness and added stuff. I'll talk about some specifics in a second, but there's so much that accelerates, and just the idea that y'all as a team would continue to cultivate your home as a home base, as a place of refuge, as a place of safety, for your students and your family as well. So the idea of y'all cultivating home as home base, and y'all can have conversation together as a husband-wife team about it. Do we feel like that's the case? Are there things that we would like to change? I'm aware I've had conversations with some of you in the last months of life, and I believe that these are the kinds of things that I have heard some talking about, of just like wanting to address what it's like at home and wanting it to be a place of ongoing growth and encouragement and peace and those kinds of things. So just think about your home as a home base for you and your spouse, y'all as a team, because y'all are the ones that are going to be remaining there once your students are gone. But then beyond that, to your students, and specifically I'm thinking now about your high school students, that it would be just a place of desire and refuge for them. The ACT, the SAT, there's now one called the CRT, and the college that or trade school that your sons and daughters or the job that they move to, these are not the things that define them. And I'm aware that this is what our system is. It is a merit-based, make this score if you're moving in that realm, and the score determines what's going to happen. And I think it sucks. I am sad that that's what the system is like, but it is the system that we live in. And I just simply want to encourage you that the pressure that your sons and daughters are under about all of these lettered things, SAT, ACT, CRT, all these things, as you move towards college visits. I'm aware that some of you this very weekend are doing college visits, which my heart is very tender about for you. Is remember that you have a lot to do with how those things are defining your sons and daughters. And so some of you may be thinking, man, you're off base. And, I have a different opinion of that. And I want you to know that I respect you about that. But having been around students for all these years, I've had the conversations with students just talking about the really crushing pressure that they experience in a time that is very scary for them in some ways. So these lettered things are not their definition. Friendship transition. I believe that one of the kind of untalked about things is that as your sons and daughters move through these high school years, is that you are moving. You're still their parent and you're going to remain their parent, but you are in the midst of a transition time into becoming not more of their friend, but being a friend as well. And so just to begin thinking about even just this question, what would you hope for about friendship with your sons and daughters as time goes on? Again, some of you may be saying, already friends with my sons and daughters. And so I just want to say, keep envisioning and keep dreaming and keep praying about that. And I will say, some of you all have older students who are away, but I will say that in the last few years, as our older two sons have gotten married and have been gone, coming up on their third anniversary in a couple of weeks, that just slowly growing friendship with them while they are in other locations has been challenging. And it's also been a really, really special gift to not primarily operate as their parent, but to operate as an encourager and as a friend in their life. And that is a really, really special and sweet gift that is happening. And so I hope that I will get to experience that with some of you as well. So be aware that there's a friendship transition, I believe, that can happen in these years. A driver's license is something to celebrate and grieve. I remember in high school years, the early high school years, I was Trey's ride to school, and it was like maybe an 8-minute drive, and I absolutely just loved it. I'm not saying that every morning, but I really liked just having that time. There was time when it was quiet. There was time when there was irritation. There was time when we listened to music. There was time when we listened to sports talk radio. There was time when we talked about the game that was happening that day. So it's not like every single time was the same. Every single time was just amazing. But what I was aware of is that it was time that I was getting to be with Trey on a regular basis. That was a little blip of time just to get to be around him and be with him. And what I was aware of is that it is actually really, really cool when your students get their driver's license and they can move themselves about. And it's kind of almost this cool thing of like, wow, I don't have to do that anymore. And then that is both a celebration feeling, but then there was also some grieving of, wow, their life really changes when they get their license. For those of you who have older high school students and your students are already driving, you know that reality, that it changes the dynamic of relationship. It changes the dynamic of time that you're around them. And I know that those kinds of things affect different people in different ways. So I think that there's a mixture of celebrating the new stage that they're transitioning in. And then for some, there can be grieving about, that you've transitioned out of a particular way that you relate with each other as they are given more freedom to move about and locomote as they're able to. So I want to encourage you to both celebrate that and grieve that together. Fight for their hearts. I'm not going to say a ton about this, but to just simply say that I would love for you as a spouse team to think about ways that you can really labor to stay engaged with your sons and daughters. I mentioned to the middle school parents last week that very subtly and yet very quickly, patterns of really not connecting within your family can happen through busyness, through stress, through strain. And the reality is the longer that continues that way, the harder it is for there to be connection points. And so I don't know if it's a comfortable thought or an uncomfortable thought for you as a spouse team to think about ways that you can labor to stay engaged with your high school sons and daughters, to fight for their hearts, to be ones that are caring for who they really are as young men and women, not about the athletic realities or the academic realities, but about them, the student that you have lived with for the last 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 years of life that are now in this transition time. And so I want to encourage y'all to share time together, have a date, talk, have conversation about ways that you think together that you could be engaged to just keep fighting for the hearts of your sons and daughters. If that phrase is weird or foreign, please let me know. I would love to talk to you about that as well. Grieve and celebrate the closure. I'm aware that, especially for 3 families in this particular time, that they are moving through into their sons and daughters, their sons and daughter graduating. And again, mixture of feelings, mixture of personalities. We all approach that in different ways. But I believe that it is a significant enough change in the life of a family that I would encourage you to celebrate it, because it is so exciting, and to also grieve it. And a couple of our senior families, they've already done this. They have older children that have already graduated high school. We have one family who this is their first. And so just to be aware that it may not be all celebration. There may be sadness as you think about this person that you've invested in over almost 2 decades of life, and now there's about to be this pretty significant shift that is cool, that is exciting, but it's also change. And what I want to especially say is this, just take this if this applies for you. I would love for you to consider letting your student know that you're grieving about the change, that there is loss for you, if there is loss. And here's one big reason, 2 reasons why. The first one is this, because I feel like there's health in being present about how you are about it. There's so much tendency to just stay busy, stay ACTing, stay SATing, stay college visiting, do all the stuff, and not really acknowledge that these people that you've invested in for these several decades, how you are about it. And so acknowledging it for your own health, but then you are also casting vision about what it will be like when your sons and daughters, if they're married and or if they have children, and they're going through this process with them. You're plowing some ground now and casting vision for them about what that will be like for them with their sons and daughters your grandchildren. And so I think that both of those are really good reasons to think about you being candid with your sons and daughters. I'm not saying that you're like layering pressure over them, like telling them don't go because this is too hard for me. I'm not saying that, but I am saying I don't think that you personally have to just stay positive and cheery about all of it. If you're aware that you're going to miss them, let them know that you're going to miss them. That's what I'm saying. So you are setting a pattern of vision for them, for coming generations in your family. There's so much about this time. I'm wrapping up. There's so much about this time. There's so many moving parts. Even just thinking about our senior families, this whole year, I remember getting the senior calendar. Literally, it started before senior year. You were getting all the information about you're going to order your invitations and the cap and gown, and then a pandemic, and all the stuff. And so there's so much. And so just the thought about ways to have simple check-ins. Is there a way to have a simple check-in? Is it maybe it's not a routine meal, but maybe you on a weekly basis just try to find one meal where you're eating together and just checking in. And even if the checking in feels awkward, and even if it feels like they're stiff-arming that, it doesn't mean that you can't try. And maybe that's a Chick-fil-A date. Maybe it's just something simple like that. You go and grab food somewhere and bring it and have it together before, they head to school one morning. Just even something maybe different than as usual. But the idea being, don't let the freight train of the progression of high school just run you over. That you can seek to have some little places where you're checking in with each other and with your students about just how they are along the way. Letting go is hard for them too. Excuse me, I'm sorry. It's exciting. And as I was jotting myself notes, I remember that for me, the going was exciting. I didn't hate my parents. I didn't have like a dagger under my bed. I wasn't like I did not hate them. I wasn't trying to escape them. I know that there are some that's the case at times. But regardless of how that will be, what the relational dynamic is, the departing and the transitioning is also hard for the student. And sometimes it's easy to miss over that, even if they seem really, really excited and are really excited. This is probably the most jarring life transition that they've come to at this point, whatever that transition might be. No more high school realm, trade school, just getting a job, the reality of working or going away to college or whatever that might look like. And so just having in mind and remembering that they are experiencing hardness in the midst of this too. It's not just exciting for them. And last two things is to simply say that it's easy to just bludgeon past the fact that both of you as spouses and your students, that it is actually kind of a needy place and a needy time. It's not necessarily just all routine. And I think that not just in intersections like this, but pretty ongoing, that we get used to not acknowledging our need. That we live, we got this, we know this routine, we do this. And in some ways, what do we really need Jesus for? What do I need Jesus for if I'm never really in a place that I'm acknowledging that I need him? And I needed him when our children were transitioning. I didn't know how I needed him in all those ways, but I do know now, and some then, that I needed him. And so just a kind of a below the surface line thought, and that is that amidst all of the fullness and the busyness, it would be really easy to not know that everybody in the transition time in your family is needy, and that includes siblings, younger siblings who remain this departure can really affect them. And I want to encourage you to also just be alert to that. The check-in is not just with your high school student or the one that's about to graduate. And then the last is just a question, and that is, how will you exit this stage? And the thought there is, will the exit from high school be just an absolute nightmarish blur of hectic craziness? Maybe, because it is a lot. Will there be some moments that y'all pursue and seek out together as a family, as a father with sons, fathers with daughters, mothers with sons, mothers with daughters, moms and dads with everybody? Will there be just some moments to look back to, perhaps that y'all brainstorm and think about together as a family camping trip or something? I don't know what it might be, but I guess the thought there is that will the main thing that is remembered about the exiting of these years just be bedlam, crazy busyness? Or will there be some looking back to the way that y'all were seeking to savor and treasure some of these transitioning moments together as a family? And I would also say again that I would love to dialogue and brainstorm with you about that, if that would be at all helpful. With your sons and daughters, you are not out. You're not out of the picture. You're still with them, and they actually really need you to be with them. I hope that these words will encourage, spur you on. If they've been confusing in any way, please call me and ask me to clarify. My intention is not to offend anyone. I'm not lumping everybody into this is everybody's experience. But my heart and thought here is I'd rather say some things and encourage y'all to be thinking about them, especially as husband and wife team, than not say anything and then it's all of a sudden just over for everybody. Particular blessings over and prayers over our senior families, those 3 families, but for all of you journeying with, processing with, and changing with high school students, I want to pray for you now. Jesus, thank you for these moments today. I want to thank you for the amazing, challenging honor and privilege of having sons and daughters who are in their high school years. And I simply want to ask God, would you allow these families to experience not just what is stereotypical in our culture or even stereotypical in Christian culture? I pray that they would experience what you want for them in these transitioning years for their family. I pray that you would allow Lee and I to be an encouragement to anyone that we would be able to. And I pray for new ground to be plowed even in these latter days of the 2,555 days of middle and high school. And I want to pray your blessing over my friends today. Thank you in Jesus' name. Thank you for taking the time to watch. Please reach out to me if you'd like to talk further, and the peace of Christ to you all.